you tell me now? Wonder what you tell me now? False flying, false preaching, yeah, yeah, false teaching, yeah. Wake up, y'all, come on. You preachers.
All right, we're back. This is the Courageous Hour. We have Reverend Oz. He stuck around, and now we're going to kick it with Professor Wright. And this particular topic, Laura left us last week as we talked about power. Do you have it? Do you realize that you have it? And then we also talked about economic power. And, you know, a lot of times on the show, Keith and I and Laura, we always give all these stats. But I'm glad she invited Professor Wright in so he can help break it down even further on how much power you actually have. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Professor Wright.
What I do, what I've done, I'm from Detroit. I grew up in Detroit. I graduated from Renaissance.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
All right.
And I joined the Army, and I went to Desert Storm.
Okay.
And it was there that I really understood a lot of things. You know, war is artificial. It's artificial to your body. It doesn't seem right. Like if you ever been to the woods, it's peaceful.
Yeah.
War seems artificial. It's very odd. So I came back from there, and I bought my first house when I was 23 on Schoolcraft in Southfield. My wife didn't like it here in Detroit, and I'm telling you this so you can see how I got this.
Yeah,
so I got to be here. So I apologize.
No,
I apologize.
No, go ahead. You got to give us the background.
My wife at the time didn't like Detroit, and so she wanted to go back to Kansas, Fort Riley, Kansas. And so I joined back into the Army, and there's a reason why a lot of veterans are up under bridges and homeless, because the military is an insulated, isolated, secure environment. And if you do not prepare yourself for the civilian world, you will not make it out here. So that's what happened to me. And I said, okay, I'm gonna go back in and I'm gonna prepare myself. So I went back in, I bought my second house, and I was 23 years old. I rented out my first house here on, like I said, Schoolcraft in Southfield. This is before the internet.
Okay.
So I go to the library, and if you remember going to the library during tax season, it used to be all those tax books all up and down the aisles in the library. So I went and grabbed all these tax books and started reading them. Taxes are the most important thing in this country, really. It's really all about the taxes. And the more I learn about taxes, the more I realize how many people are being misled. Because the more I learn about taxes, I learn about insurance, investments, real estate, mortgages, banking, credit. Everything is related to taxes.
Yeah.
And so I said, man, I was 23 years old. I said, I'm going to open a tax business, except I'm going to be licensed in everything, so I can tell my clients how to do everything correctly.
Yes.
So, and see, I go to Korea, I come back, I'm at Fort Bragg, I'm a paratrooper, I jumped out of planes, and I opened my tax business in 1995.
All right.
I was active duty paratrooper, opened my tax business in 95. In 1998, I get out of the Army. I get my life, health, auto, home, long-term care, real estate license in 1998.
You named it all.
I get my stockbroker's license in 2000. My my investment advisor's license in 2000. Get my bachelor's in finance, my master's in accounting, certified fraud examiner. I published my book, Biblical Principles to Prosperity, in 2003.
Congratulations.
Yes.
All right.
And the reason why I wrote it, what moved me to write it, was because I was in school, and this is where the question and the topic of power comes in.
Okay.
I was in school, and I was watching and listening what they were talking about finances.
Yes.
And what they tell us and what they taught us was contrary to what is really your natural existential spirit. It's totally contrary. The narrative, we used the word narrative earlier. The narrative about it is manipulative. It has you doing these things. All you gotta do is look at a pair of Jordans. Who really wants a $240 pair of tennis shoes? Really? But it's the narrative that teaches you these things.
Yes.
And so I wrote the book, and I was moved to write the book, and I studied the Aramaic, the Aramaic, the Torah, all of the old scriptures. I studied all of them, so I can make sure that this was absolutely as accurate as I can make it. And so I started seeing more people. Business consulting, accounting, all these things. I've seen over 5,000 people. And that's why I specialize in financial trauma and financial education. I'm an adjunct professor of accounting over at Oakland Community. Because I really, really am committed to making sure that people have the information. Because you asked about this power, and I'm going back to it. I say all that to say this. In the movie The Matrix, there's a scene where Morpheus, Trinity, and Neo go see the Merovingian. And the Merovingian says, "Do you know why you're here?" And they say, "No." And he says, "Well, you come to me without why, so you come to me without power." Okay? And so what I try to do is get as much information and educate myself so I can share that knowledge. So now the person has the power behind it. I'm working on my PhD in psychology because what I have found is that people keep doing goofy things with money.
Yeah.
Counterproductive. It's in the psychological field, they call it maladaptive behavior. And so you're doing drugs, alcoholism, promiscuity, violence, hostility, anger, gambling. You're doing something because you're not at peace.
Yeah.
So you're looking for a relief, a release, or an escape.
So, and I'm glad we're bringing that up because now, with this being prom season,
oh yeah,
one of the things I recognize is as prom send-offs. Here you have folks who are breaking their. Basically, they're borrowing money to send a child off for one evening. And it's not to go to college. It's not to get married. It's not to do an investment. But literally for a 4-hour dance, you're spending thousands of dollars. And what does then that show? The child who then comes home the next day has to return that rent-a-car. The clothes that they bought, because they're only going to wear the outfit one time, or their hair, whatever goes on. But just like you just said, there is a piece of immaturity on the parent or the adult who then cultivates that idea because they think that this is the norm. And that child then goes off into the real world knowing that it is okay to borrow thousands of dollars for 4 hours and have no means to pay it back.
That's the social standard, and it's really the way society, this particular society, manipulates and creates the narrative for people to behave, because it really doesn't want the people to have the power. That's really where it all boils down to. So money can be framed or viewed as a source of power.
Yes,
it can be, and so if I can keep you without money, I can basically keep you without power. So now the question says, so how do I go about getting the money? Or I could say, how do I go about getting the power? Am I saying this as a synonymous? Am I using them interchangeably? Yes, I am.
Yes,
I am. And so what that is that if you can learn how to get your money, you essentially by default learn how to get your power.
There you go. Okay. I like that. And it's making sense. Even for me, I listen to Eric Thomas. I listen to a lot of motivational speakers. And the one thing I love about this is what you do now, moving forward, after you become enlightened and you know right from wrong, what you do is up to you.
Yes.
And it was similar, like you were getting ready to say, it's crazy that we know what to do, we don't do it, but we want a different result.
Right. That is absolutely just like, it doesn't make any sense. Right. But again, it goes to, in the scripture, it says, to say, right division, make it plain for those who see may run with it, right? We know that one. And one of the things that happens as we are three-tiered people, three-tiered beings, entities in this planet, in this dimension. You have a mind, which is a physical tool that allows you to encapsulate your other two dimensions, which is your body and your existential or your authentic essence.
Okay.
People call that your spirit. Okay. So your mind bridges the two together. Okay. Except it's being influenced by your 5 senses, your body, which is why Paul says, crucify your flesh, because the only thing your flesh wants is ease, pleasure, and comfort.
You need to say that again, because somebody in the listening audience right now needs to hear that. And you just put it plain.
Yeah.
I mean, because it makes total sense in the language that you're using. You're putting it plain that it is your flesh driving you to be opposite of your own principles. Of
your own and authentic essence is what I call it. The authentic essence is that which is in you. That is what Jesus was. He is an original being that came from on high. We did too. And so we manifest in the flesh just like he did. And so the body, and that's why Paul says crucify your flesh. And to me, To Israel, the most important verse in the Bible is not John 3:16. To me, the most important verse in the Bible to me is Matthew 24:4, that says, "Take heed that no man deceive you." And if this world here is the enemy's, then he is working at every turn to deceive me.
Yes.
So that means I have to do what Jesus says and find the truth. Because the truth is what will set me free from this bondage of deception. So my body is
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Professor Wright hitting the nail on the head. And we got the Love Fest here with Reverend Oz here. This is Keith and Laura and Tamuk. Thank you for setting me up. I appreciate this.
I'm just saying, if you listen to your body, every time you have a thought, you have to challenge it. And I try to identify, is it coming from my five senses? Is it coming from the indoctrination that I received in the culture, in the society, in the world? Or is this coming from my existential, my authentic essence? Which is where the way you can identify it is almost like intuition, the word intuition. Okay. Can you feel this without thinking about it? If that's how it is, then that's really your authentic essence trying to speak to you. And if you deny your authentic essence, that's where your anxiety comes from. That's where all your conflict comes from internally.
All right.
So you have this internal conflict because your authentic essence is like, hey, you came down here from on high, just like Jesus did. He had an assignment. We have assignments. Okay. Yeah. But if you don't stay connected and connections, all relationships have two factors. One is frequency, and the other is proximity. How close and how often do you meet? That's how you build a relationship. That's what prayer is about.
Yes.
Because you can stay in connection and you can pray whenever you want, anytime you want, and you can just maintain this connection. So if you stay connected, then you can identify these things for yourself.
Yes.
You see, and you don't fall victim to your body. One of the things, like I said, one of the biggest things about the body that's deceiving us now is I'm gonna use this word, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but I'm just using the word as a whole. It's just overeating, gluttony.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you can see yourself doing that, more than likely you have some type of conflict or anxiety about you, and you're trying to experience relief, release, or escape through the ingestion, and then your body manifests the negative consequences of that overeating.
Yeah.
So now you have the high blood pressure and the diabetes. You have those things, but somewhere along the lines, you are out of balance, and you haven't been listening, or you haven't identified, or you don't know it's there.
Yeah.
And that's why I said, if you don't know the why, you don't have any power. You don't know that authentic essence is there.
Yes.
You've been listening to your body, thinking your body is your existence. Your body is a tool, and it's going to go away. And when it goes away, doesn't mean that you do.
Hit the nail on the head. So now, tell us the name of your book, and is it available online?
It was available. I had to remove it because the publisher was not so conducive. But I don't know. Last time I saw it was Amazon. It was like $600. But the name of the book is called Biblical Principles to Prosperity. It was designed for a man to read.
Got it.
Real easy. It's like 108 pages, and it has 7 principles that lead to prosperity. And when I use the word prosperity in the original text, when John wrote it, the word was hudos.
Okay.
And there's a prefix, EU. And you know that prefix when you hear, what's the song? What's the name of that word? If you put somebody down, euphemism. Okay, yes. EU means good. Okay, Eugene, good genes. Or euthanasia, you put someone to sleep in a kind way.
Yes.
Okay, euthanize. Okay, EU is a prefix that means good. Hodos, H-O-D-O-S, means journey. So when John wrote and he says, above all things, I wish that ye prosper, all he's saying is, I want you to get to where you want to be. You set out I set out today to be here at 6:15. Guess what? I'm here at 6:15. That's prosperity. That's what that means.
There you go. Okay.
That's all it means.
I got you.
And so what the people have to do is really understand that there are 7 principles that lead to collective, aggregate, total, interrelated prosperity.
Yes.
Meaning
Not just monetarily, but
Right.
you're talking spiritual.
Yes.
You're talking health.
Yes.
The whole compass
Yes.
that is going to make you be prosperable is mind, body, and soul.
That's it. That's it. And you have to understand that those three components, or I call them facets, your three facets, your three existences, you have to identify and recognize individually and leverage and utilize them collectively for your benefit.
Yes. Got it. I'm understanding it. So is what Professor Wright is telling us, that you do have the power. It is up to you to make your connection. And then also, so one of the things being in the educational world, we always do this, and it is meeting people where they are at.
Yes.
And sometimes that becomes difficult because we want individuals to already be at a eighth. So let's use reading level. I want you to be on the 8th grade reading level.
Right.
But if nobody in your household reads, if nobody that you are familiar with or you come across reads, it's going to be very difficult for a student to come in at 14, 15, or 18, 19, 20 to be on a reading level when they haven't had the opportunity to even know folks who are on that. And the people who they do know, which are a lot of times teachers or principals or the folks who are in the educational industry. And what I'm paying attention to now, because as I said, I'm pursuing my PhD, and my anxiety is about writing. And like I think for me, as I pay attention to it now, I didn't have a lot of writers around me. I had people who were very good at being articulate, and they could write it. You know, they come off the cuff, and then they can. You know, I'm a good reader, and it really didn't happen for me until I was actually teaching a reading class to a bunch of middle schoolers, and I went through that process with them on helping them get to grade level. And I'm saying that because for me, my example, I had folks who were skills trade. They use their hands. The Ebony and Jet magazine was on the table because my mom had it there. My grandmother had the newspaper. The men in my family, it was get underneath the car, or here, I'm gonna show you how to run this wire, protect the wire, things like that. So if we don't have those examples in households, a lot of times children, they're not going to automatically just sit down and pick up a book if, one, there are no books in the house, or if, two, there are nobody who's there who's actually practicing for them what good reading sounds like. And that's the trick that I use with those kids in St. Louis. I would do a lot of audio recording and say, this is what good reading sounds like. And then they would come back and I just say, all I want you to do is just memorize what I just read to you. And then they said, now I would always leave them with that hook of, and almost like the Batman cartoon thing. Okay, well, what's going to happen next on the next page? And challenge them that way. So then it forces them to want to read on their own. And I think the piece that we're dealing with now, especially in this particular time and area, is folks want it easy. And the words that you use is it ease, comfort, and it was pleasure. So they stick with those, not realizing these are things that are harming you if you are not productive in learning yourself. Because what might be easy for me might not be easy for James, or just the opposite.
Can I say something about this easy and hard? Like I teach, and the students say, well, that seems so. I teach accounting, and accounting is not intuitive. It's very foreign. It just doesn't seem to flow. So I have to teach it on your level, like you said, meet you where you are, and I present it to you to where you can understand it. But the students are always talking about how hard it is, and I says, check this out. And I tap on a table, and I say, is that easy or hard? And they say, well, it's hard. And then I tap on a chair, and I say, is that easy or hard? And they say, well, that's easy. It's just soft. I says, neither one of them are either one of those. In order to have a hard, you must make a comparison to something else. But it is just what it is. And that soft is just soft. Remember, I was in the Army for 10 years. So I ran miles. I know what is really hard.
You're right. Okay? You know what hard is.
I know what hard is. However, it's not hard when you put it in your mind to just let it be what it is. There isn't a should. You know, they say there's no should and there's no supposed tos. There's not. There is just an is. And that's what makes God so powerful, because there is an is. And that's all that there is.
No gray area.
There's no gray area. There is a is and there's a isn't. Now, the good part about it is this. When you can take an intangible, non-existence is and make it tangible, that's why they say faith all things are possible. You don't see my book in 2002 or in 2000 or in 1999. But to me,
you started up here.
It is. And I write the vision, I make it plain. So then when you see it, I run with it. And poof, there it goes, it manifests. It is now.
This is a great show. Callers, please call in 837-1340. We have Reverend Oz and Professor Wright, but we're talking about just with now. I'm gonna try to give it back in layman's terms. What he said. So is as you think of, so then you become.
Yeah, that's right.
So literally, we have some people right now. You want to be successful, so therefore you have to start thinking and doing what successful people do, which is action. And I think that goes back to the consistency that you're going to see at Love Fest happening on Saturday. That is the action, the word in action coming to manifest, because they're not going to let it die down. It didn't die down after the Super Bowl. It continued. And now look at where they're at. And so definitely, as what Professor Wright is talking about, some of the simplest things, and we do this a lot. And I deal with adult learners because I love working with kids. Kids are very easy. They'll actually do what you want them to do as long as they trust you. The next step is, as adults, we tend to think because I've gotten older that I know more. No, actually, you've gotten older and you kind of know less because now you're dependent upon it is or it isn't. And through their responses of people who haven't seen what education can look like in urban communities. If you haven't been successful there, it becomes very difficult for them to imagine it happening. So now you have folks, they always bring outsiders in, and my homeboy always tell me this all the time. You're always going to be the expert 5 miles away from where you really work at. So you can be in the middle of the jungle, and I was the principal over at Southeastern, so that's what we called it, the jungle. You can be in the middle of the jungle, but nobody called on me to be the expert. It was the folks in Florida, the folks in New York, to come and tell us about how did you do this in Detroit, not the people in Detroit. And I'm pretty sure you see this at the church level too. You have folks who are still maybe questioning about why so many different churches around the city are participating. And what are the other ones doing? Instead of just enjoying the fact that these folks are courageous enough to build that gap, close the gap.
Correct.
So that's where we at. And I think we got 2 minutes left. So definitely I'm going to invite both Professor Wright back on, because I think what he hit a nail on the head that I really think our listening audience maybe hasn't caught. It is so you think, just like he said, the book was in his mind. But however long it took him to write it, it is out here now. And the research that went behind it was to be so thorough to help you and I, and you, the listening audience, figure out what is going to make you be prosperous and that you do have power. Because we sometimes give up our power so many times to individuals who don't deserve it. And I think that comes back to the example thing. They didn't have a strong example. I'm pretty sure now that, and I'm going to kick it with Professor Wright afterwards, and I'll make sure I get the contact information for Reverend Oz, so that Hartford Memorial Baptist Church can come on and get involved in this for next year. And it needs to be a lecture series that explains what Professor Wright is talking about. This has been the Courageous Hour. You guys got any closing remarks? We got 30 seconds left.
There's a moral background to power that gives it authority, and that moral power is love. That's why the Lord said to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's where power becomes authority, through love.
Through love.
Love fest.
Yes.
What you got, Professor Wright?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Well, we definitely going to invite you back.